It doesn't.
It's going.
Okay, perfect. All right, so welcome everyone again. And then, so let's just kind of go through just our usual facilitation principles and group agreements quickly. We'll be brief on these as we are all very familiar with these by now, but it's important for us to just reground. And some of the facilitation principles that we've really tried to honor in this space have been hope, believing that a better future is possible for all of us, children, providers, families, and definitely honoring the collective wisdom of the group, which we have seen so much of. As always, centering equity as it is at the heart of this effort and the development of this program. And lastly, anticipating experiencing discomfort, which I think many of us have perhaps felt, and just thankful for having you participate and stay with us and, join a fifth and now a sixth meeting. So thank you. In the group agreements that we've developed together, I'm just going to highlight the main ones, right? Way of being present in the meeting, ways of understanding and learning. Definitely have been open to learning from other perspectives and open to new possibilities there. Communication, giving others an opportunity to speak. Hope and strengths-based. I've seen this group really, really hone in on this, and it's been beautiful to watch. The shared space, the collaboration, and the giving grace, and ultimately reflecting on our own biases, engaging tension, and ensuring that all voices are considered. So it's been a great process to observe and to be here with you all. So it's kind of a bittersweet feeling, I think, for this meeting, just thinking like, wow, there's been so much discussed and so many learnings for, I think, all of us, but definitely for our ELD team. So thank you for all of that. And Carrie from Build, all of us.
Yeah. Thank you, Karina. I think, we were in a reflective mood when we were planning this meeting, because last week we were able to send you a document that gave you the original draft rule set language. We took all the comments that we received on every term and kind of requirements that the rule set's ultimately going to have, where you could see all the feedback you had given in one place. You didn't have to comb through past PowerPoints. And then we gave updated, revised term definitions and requirements based on the feedback that you were having. And I think that put us in a reflective mood of around the 5 meetings. And where we started with was really like probably a little bit of our own frustration and gaining all clarity all together about what really is a rule. And it is as a legal document, and it's really the bullet points to a law that was passed to really give more description about how the law is going to work. And it's really interesting because there's a lot more details in design and implementation that will go into this work that you'll be involved in afterwards, but that we're really trying to think about how the rulemaking and the rules, where were there gaps in the original draft, where were there maybe unanticipated consequences or impacts that needed to be thought about, and where there just needed to be general clarity, kind of like where did the rule sets get it right and where did the rule set still need work. And that we really started with understanding suspension and expulsion, what we know about research, what do we know from our practical experiences together. And that, we just wanted to put this slide back up in front of you because we wanted to put children, family, and providers back in the center of the room as we kind of think about the rule set and what it's trying to communicate about, really that caring for young children is hard work, typically underpaid and undersupported, and that children can have behaviors that adults find very challenging, and that we know that young children are suspended and expelled because of these behaviors. We also know that our young children who are Black and Brown are suspended and expelled at rates that are greater than what they represent in the group, and that it's the same behaviors that their white peers have. And so that not only are we concerned about expulsion and suspension in general, because it doesn't set a great trajectory for any children in their early childhood years, but we're very concerned about the disparities and inequities that also creates with the of what we're seeing of who's expelled and why are they expelled. And that we know that this is also true for young children with developmental delays and disabilities also are overrepresented in the rates of suspension and expulsion from programs. And so really want to think about what are the supports that everyone needs, children, families, and providers, so that children can receive the early development and support for the kind of experiences that they have in these early years that will really have a lifelong impact. And that what the law did was really establish the suspension and expulsion prevention program and said that there needed to be kind of 4 major components of the program. So you see what the rules have to comment on and where there don't need to be rules. So it's really thinking about, the law asks the early learning division to think about the support for the early care and education workforce and what's the training, coaching, and consultation that needs to be provided. For technical assistance that already exist or will exist, what's the knowledge and skills that that technical assistance workforce has around these kinds of issues, as well as then actually standing up and adding to the supports in infant and early childhood mental health consultation part of the support. And that means then really wanting to create a warm line, an easy way for providers to request support and for help, but also to think about the coordination and assistance between mental health consultants and the other kinds of technical assistance. So as you guys communicate from the field about where are their strong relationships, who has what knowledge, can we get to a place, can we have that hope that Karina talked about, where people are getting the right kind of support at the time that they need it. And that the law specifically said we needed to have rules about a range of common terms. And so you can see several of those terms listed here, but now you're very familiar. I forget, Katrina, now are we up to like 18 terms, which is a lot of terms for a rule set. We have to establish that this will be a grant making program to create the infant and early childhood mental health consultation part of the prevention program. And there was define a requirement around providers and programs that they must request help from the suspension and expulsion prevention program once it stood up and offering services. And that a lot of this work has now been captured. So you were sent a Google Sheet on June 30th. And what we did is provide you the original draft language, summarized all the feedback that we received from you from those conversations. And then you can see that each term then had a revised or updated definition. So that's where we're kind of entering into today's conversation.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And we're going to jump into some breakout groups here just to, again, go through the language, and we'll have these 7 definitions. Just kind of figured it'd be best to give all the definitions and then allow each group to spend as much time on whichever definition kind of came to like as a priority or top of mind, or felt that it needed more work. So these are the 7 definitions, but we'll kind of just walk ourselves through them once again before we break up, and we'll have again about 40 minutes to discuss is our goal. We'll then come back and try to have a debrief as an entire group again.
And I think, Katrina, you're going to walk us through, and we decided to stop sharing slides here and actually share what the Google Sheet looks like, right? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Let's see, could you make it maybe just a little bit bigger?
Yeah.
So I don't know how many of you had a chance to even take a look at this. I know it came out on, what was that, Thursday? And then we headed into a holiday weekend. And I know I enjoyed having a holiday weekend and tuning some other things out. So it is still available. We'll talk about these specific ones today, but the whole entire set is available. So you can see down at the bottom, I think Carrie's mouse is down there. there's 2 tabs. One says selected definitions for RAC conversation. That's for today. And then the other tab says full rule set draft. So the whole works is in there. And a column for you to put your name and then to put your comments. Yeah. So please feel free to comment. Please feel free to wordsmith all that you want. And as we'll share at the end, I also will be offering some kind of office hours next week for anybody that wants to have additional conversation. So with the term suspension, there were, I think I don't think the definition itself changed very much. There was a little bit of change. I think one of the comments was around making sure the language fits all type of providers. So not like removing a child to the director's office. Took that language out and said, removing a child to a different location, that kind of thing. So I don't think this actually changed very much. Each of these definitions, suspension, expulsion, soft expulsion, exclusionary practices, I think all of them use the language of, suspension in response to behavior. And that was a conversation. The word behavior was one that came up a lot of like, well, what do we mean by behavior? And also, like, can we broaden it to be about anything? And it is, you wouldn't believe how many conversations we've had about just the word behavior. But the challenge is, for those of you who would like to see that taken out, if we take it out, then it becomes like we just can't actually truly manage like the changing of a child due to, lack of payment or things like that. We kind of have to specify behavior to know kind of the parameters of what we're talking about. We'll be able to define behavior more specifically in kind of the program development documents that we create. So let's see, I think expulsion changed hardly at all. Soft expulsion, I changed the order of the wording. So kind of read the original definition, read the updated definition, see if it makes sense. I think there was some confusion before about how is it similar or different to suspension or expulsion. And the point of this one, and I'll say this, and then you can see if the text brings that across. The point of this one is the family makes the decision to withdraw the child, but it's because of things that have happened in the early learning center that have made it hard for it could be repeated suspensions. It could be other types of things that the provider has said, you must do X, Y, or Z in order to come. Exclusionary practices. Part of the feedback on this one was, isn't this an umbrella term? And it is. It's an umbrella term for suspension, expulsion, soft expulsion. We also wanted to have it in here to capture those things that don't explicitly fall, things that are exclusionary but don't explicitly fall into suspension and expulsion. Things like not being able to get in the front door, like not being able to become enrolled. You can't be suspended or expelled if you can't become enrolled in the first place. So that's one example. So the next one, anti-racist. Our original definition was very limiting in the sense that it referenced a person. In the updated definition, it references a person, policy, or system. Aside from that, it didn't change a whole lot. However, I and the rest of the planning team, we would be really grateful for any wordsmithing, any toss it out and try something different type feedback. Like this is one for me, we, as a RAC planning team, we had probably an hour-long conversation about just this definition and ended up not making a huge change to it. But if you want to advocate for a huge change, do so. We would really value your thoughts and feedback on that. So inclusion and inclusive practices. These two, there were a lot of feedback and differing feedback. So these two definitions, and I think inclusion particularly, for me, they feel like they're really unfinished. And we don't have to necessarily finish them today. But there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think about with all of these, but there's a lot to think about related to inclusion around supporting children with disabilities, supporting children whose skin is Black and brown, making sure that we really are including all people in an environment, in a classroom setting. So there is one of the pieces of feedback that was given was around that there's a state level team working on inclusion that has definitions. So I actually asked Meredith Villines, I think she's here. I know I saw her. There she is. She and I had a conversation earlier, and then also Meredith had some specific, so I'm hoping to have additional conversation both with Meredith and anybody else around this definition. Meredith had a specific comment as well about some specific language that's used in this. So I invited Meredith to share her thoughts on this wording.
Hi, everybody. And I am not skilled at being brief, but I have practiced. So thank you, Katrina. Both myself and Melinda Benson of Inclusive Partners are co-coordinators of the state team that was acknowledged, and we wrestled with this language around, you see it here, regardless of race, appearance, language, ability, gender, or gender identity. The use of the word regardless, we determined erases the strengths, values, and human dignity encompassed in how we all show up in our differing often intersectional identities. And so what we really, in my suggestion, I aligned that with what the state team landed on, is changing it from regardless to more inclusive language that honors, celebrates, and acknowledges how individuals show up in all of their human dignity, including race, appearance, language, ability, gender or gender identity, and any other intersection of identity that a person may really hold true, because we should celebrate difference and how we all show up. And it's one thing, we just felt that the word regardless erased the gifts and value in all of those different identities.
Thank you, Meredith. So any feedback that you all have related to that specific language or any of this, please, we want to hear it. There also had originally been a question that came up about what's the difference between inclusion and inclusive practices. And inclusion is sort of like the broad, it's like those values, policies, and practices. But really, like, values, policies is big things. And then inclusive practices are, what is it that we do to promote inclusion? what are those things? So it's kind of like the inclusive practices are the actions, if you will. Yeah. All right. So if we had unending time, we'd go through all of them, but would really invite your feedback on these and then all of the others as well.
Yeah, we felt like these were foundational. Like if the suspension and expulsion program is really built on these things, and if these definitions aren't right, that the others won't work, because we really want to understand what is this program preventing and how do we understand what we're talking about. So based on the comments received so far, the planning team thought this would be a good thing for us to really check in with each other about.
I should note too that you all advised us to include the term culturally specific as well as culturally responsive. So that has been added. It's very slightly modified based on an existing definition from the equity fund rule set. But any feedback, comments that you have on that would be welcome. Also, the term trauma informed is one that we didn't review before, but it is in the rule set. If you have any feedback on that, that would be welcome.
I have to fix the PowerPoint for a second.
Okay.
Switching back and forth. All right, so we thought we would give you a chunk of time to look at all the definitions. So you're meeting in small groups. Your group can choose to spend more or less time on the terms. We thought we would give you a good chunk of time to work through it and not lose time through transition. And instead of using idea boards, we wanted you to be able to wordsmith or comment directly next to the revised definition. And we thought ideas boards wasn't flexible enough. So you'll actually be working right in the Google Sheet that we were just looking at, that I was just sharing. And each group has their own column. And so if you're with Karina as your facilitator, you're group 1. If you're with Katrina, you're group 2. And if you're with John, you're group 3. So if you could pick someone to be a note taker, that would be great. And then if you want to select a spokesperson or exchange taking turns, what we'll do this time, instead of going group by group when we do a full group debrief, is we'll actually pull up the Google Sheet and go through definition by definition as part of our full group debrief. And your reflections on what does the revised definition get right? Where does it still need? If you actually have answers to the question of what does it still need, we would love and invite to see them. Remy, is the Google Sheet link already in the chat?
Working on it.
Okay.
I got it here, Remy.
Thank you. I've got too many tabs open on my Firefox right now to find it quickly, apparently.
Understood. If you have if you work on these initial set of definitions and you have plenty of time, go jump over to the next tab and keep commenting away.
So are we all set to go into breakout groups?
I think so.
Cool.
Any
We'll come
questions
back
before we
at
go?
what time will we be back at? Sorry, I was just trying to clarify for everyone.
4:10.
Sounds great.
Okay, yeah, 4:15. We're going until 4:15. Perfect. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna send you off into your breakout rooms. And some of my ELD colleagues, Melinda, Meredith, and Julia, I have not put you in any breakout rooms unless you want to go help take notes somewhere.
And Remy, do you make me co-host? So if anyone gets
I
on-
did. Yeah, I already did that. Melinda and Meredith, do you want to go take some notes?
If that would help, if that would be helpful. If not, I don't, it's up to you. You
Same.
tell me.
True. Well, I guess I'll just leave y'all here. Let's see.
Okay, that sounds good.
And Mickey, I've put you in room 2. I'm not sure if you have seen the invite or if there's some difficulties on your end. Okay, I'm gonna go off and take some
Okay.
notes, so I'll be
I can
back.
help Nikki if she needs it. All right.
Thank you.
Hi, Zakia. Do you need me to re-put you in your group?
we can probably do the questionnaire.
Hi, Lydia. I can help you return to your
I like
group.
to
Hi, thank you.
organize.
Can you please send me over to the other group? Can someone send me over to the PLC group?
Hi, Julia. Did you want me to put you back in a room?
Carrie, were you asking me?
Did you, I couldn't remember if you had been put in a room or not. I had stepped away from my desk and,
I wasn't before, but I'm happy to be part of one.
oh, it's okay. If you weren't originally part of one, you're fine.
Okay, thanks.
Carrie, it was Lydia that was looking, but it looks like you already got her.
Yeah. Ran to get a glass of water and then came back. It was like, oh.
Breaking in the market.
Oh. Oh, I'm not muted. Hello. I learned what universal design means today, everyone. Thank you.
That was beautiful, Remy.
So I believe I'm going to share the Google Sheet, and then Karina and Katrina, you're going to alternate facilitation, or however you would like to do it. So should I go ahead and share my screen?
That works great. And I'm off camera because my internet's been buggy, but
I think just to set it up, we'll have we'll look at each definition and kind of rotate through group 1, 2, and 3 for any comments. And then we'll go on to the next one, unless someone has a better idea.
And is this size okay?
I think I see some heads nodding. If it needs to be bigger for you, let me know. Let Carrie know specifically. All right. So if it's okay with all of you, let's just go in number order for simplicity. Or we can go in reverse order if you'd prefer. But group 1, comments around suspension.
So we didn't have a problem with the definition. We did want to add in, because based on feedback before about the pre-approved plan, if that was something that, you know, coach helped with, parent is approved of, it's positive in its implementation, that we wanted to add that so people weren't thinking that that kind of intervention was no longer allowed.
All right, thank you. Group 2. That's the group that I was a part of, in case you need to know.
I guess I can jump in if
Thanks, Molly.
If that's okay. Okay. I feel like I talk too much. So let's see. I can't see all of our notes. Thank you, Remy, for taking really great notes. But we liked that it was less limiting. We liked that the wording, clearly defined what out of program suspension means and doesn't mean, right? We really liked when group 1 talked about the pre-approved support plan, like what is it, who is a part of that plan, how does that, apply to the suspension in program and out of program. We also brought up, what does it mean when there's a half day, right? Does that play into the full day of suspension? If there are 2 half days, does it play into that, greater part of it, or doesn't it? Should that be a part of the definition? Let's see. Again, we liked what group 1 said about the support plan. And then that, just making sure that the correct players are a part of that support plan group, that parents are involved in that, that it's not just a plan that's created by, by the providers, that the appropriate players are there to address that. I think I'm hitting on everything, but please, Lauren, if I'm missing things, or Remy or whoever was there.
Thanks, Molly. And Leslie, I see your hand.
I did leave something out because it wasn't in the notes, but I wanted to say it because we had a discussion about this, that there was a concern about if this is the first time this occurred, like this is the first time a child is throwing furniture or whatever else, and you don't have a plan and you need to remove a child to step out and you don't have support, and maybe you don't, I know we're trying to design supports that'll exist in the future, but right now they don't exist. And so you need to do that, but you expectation would probably be that you would tell the parent that happened and how do we plan for this and make sure there is some buy-in until you get that, like what you guys just described, the right players to make a workable plan, that people are not penalized for responding the best they can with the tools they have at hand, which might be they need to take a child and step out.
Yeah. Something I shared in the small group that I was in was that in some ways it feels like this, like developing these rules and these definitions is a little bit like developing the rules of a board game, like a new board game, before you know what the game is going to be. And so like Candyland, like we're developing all of the rules and what the little people are going to look like before we've ever built the game. And like, it's so difficult to predict what are those things that we're going to need to know and how do we shape it. So it's an interesting dance, and yeah, I appreciate all of you doing this dance with us. Group 3.
It's kind of the same thing. We thought that to make sure that include be unless a part of a pre-approved support plan. So we also had the concern of what if they don't have the tools like you guys are talking about? What if there's not a direct service in place? Then what do the providers do? Are they stuck? Can they help themselves at that point? That's where kind of our hope, but also at the same time going, well, it's the kid, the child getting the care that they need as well. Their determination of why it's happening. Are these all being explored to the fullest extent as possible? At the same time, what's possible? That's kind of our spin is like, how do we put that in there without overtaxing providers at the same time, helping each other?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to toss it to you, Karina.
All right, and we're now looking at expulsion, and we will just kind of hop around order of groups or whoever wants to jump in. Looks like everyone had comments here, so.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure we added due to the child's behavior, not to just behavior, because it could be, unfortunately, in my experience, I've had an adult behavior, parent of a child, that I had to exclude because of the parent's behavior. And so we thought it was very, we need to put the word child's behavior to make sure we're clear about who we're talking about, that we're not allowing adults to get a pass.
Thanks, Leslie. Molly?
Sorry. Yeah, that's kind of where we were at too, right? Is where that should that just be the child's behavior? How do we fully design, explain that? And where does that come into play within the other definitions? But that was definitely part of our conversation as well, right? Is that it's not due to family or other behaviors or outside things, that it's specific to the student child. Yeah.
Thank you. And the last group, group 3.
We really didn't have a problem with the actual expulsion definition. It's the same as they were saying. It's just due to behavior to make sure it was encompassing all the facets of it. I mean, that was really a really well clean cut one. Just make sure we're not excluding at the same time.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, now on to soft expulsion. Looks like your screen is playing around there, Carrie. All right, group 2. Or group 3, whoever unmutes the fastest.
Okay, tell me if it is. So we felt like it's very choppy, very run-on. It might be very hard for other people to understand it unless you're very, very knowledgeable about lingo and legalese. The biggest thing was to remove the first reference of in response to. It was withdraws a child from early care and education as a result of special requirements. And then add the first sentence at imposed by, blah, blah, you'll see it in the parentheses there. And maybe at the very end, if we needed to put it as an example, blah, blah, add the rest of that down there if we feel like we're missing a piece or two from those sentences being more defined. Another thing was brought up that it would be really hard for someone that's not first language English to understand that much information in a big run-on sentence with no clear, definitive beginning, ending to process it.
Yes.
Kind of confusing.
Yes.
It is my first language.
Uh-huh. Yes, thank you. Some of these are a mess to write and then to read. All right, Molly or Lauren.
Yeah, we kind of just discussed about what had come up earlier in meetings around like imposing a trial period, or like would there be some sort of would there be a possibility for somebody to misunderstand that as long as they're imposing this policy for all children and not just imposing it in response to this behavior that's not what's being referred to in the definition. And then so we discussed that a little bit, but we kind of, I think, concluded with that was covered a lot more in the exclusionary practices definition than in this one, and maybe pertains more to that. So but yeah, I think I agree. And that's kind of where we got to too, is making it more concise might help in helping, reduce down any confusion or misunderstanding of the language.
Okay, thank you. And if any of you on an ongoing basis wants to make take your turn at rewriting this, feel free. These Google Sheets will continue to be available. Group one, I don't see any notes, but did you have any thoughts you wanted to share? Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say we didn't have a much discussion about that term.
Okay, sounds good. So then let's see, is there feedback around exclusionary practices from group two? Is it the same thing that we just said around with the last one?
Yeah. Maybe that I'm the only person talking. We discussed a lot about, the exclusionary practices. Does this roll into, is this a policy or practice that's provided for everyone? You can only come if you get that mental health treatment, which Lauren brought up, which they experienced in, a program or something in their neighborhood. Reducing the amount of hours unless approved by that pre-approved supported plan, right? Is that a part of the exclusionary practices, right? Do we make that a part of that definition? Is that, does that fall into that soft expulsion? I'm sorry, I'm kind of reading through this as I'm going through. That plan transition, this isn't soft expulsion, right? And kind of where those things playing to each other. But we kind of also brought up the fact that a lot of this conversation goes into that technical assistance part of it, right? Which isn't necessarily this part. And so that's really where a lot of our conversation landed, right? Is that, oh, okay, we're talking about these things, but it's plays more into the technical assistance part of it, and taking these notes to play into that part.
Thanks, Molly.
We have any other comments before we jump on to anti-racist? Sorry.
I'm wondering with the exclusionary practices, if adding the word, let's see here, means take action by an early child care and education program that limits the with these set of words, I was wondering if adding access also would be appropriate, in that it's possible to, if they can't even get access to the program itself, as far as even in the front door.
Yeah, then that would be a tie-in to our definition of inclusion as well.
Yes. That's what I was thinking, Katrina.
Thanks, Dominic. Back to you, Karina.
Thanks. Let's move on to anti-racist here and open to comments. Dominic, you're off mute. How do you feel about pitching it?
Yeah. So when we talked a lot about the last few words, where it says dominant racial groups, it doesn't seem that there's more than one group that's dominant. It seems to be that when we're talking about this specific term, I think that white supremacist culture is what we're talking about. And I'm wondering, and this was our conversation too, as to why we can't, or are we able to identify it in this definition, because that's we just want to be sure that we're clear as to what we're talking about, being as specific as we can. Because if we talk about, if there's in the definition of racism, a dominant group can be racist, but if there is a group that's not, they cannot be racist. So it kind of leaves that door open to have what could be perceived as that reverse racism, which is not possible, but is something that could potentially happen by leaving the term as dominant racial groups.
Yep. Particularly since we're adding culturally specific organizations. So if that culturally specific organization is not a part of a dominant group, they could be considered reverse racist because they're serving a particular population, but they're not a dominant group. So we really feel like this is not the time to be inclusive. We need to be specific here. So adding that S to dominant racial groups adds an inclusion that doesn't belong.
So where I was at as well, of why is it dominant racial groups when it is very specific? I mean, we know where the dominant racial group is, and it's very specific. Anti-racist is very specific to that white supremacist, that white culture who is dominant in the United States, across countries, right? Of, where that is, and we need to call it out. And I think we had that conversation in discussions past of this could be that opportunity, right? In the definitions to specifically call it out where it is not called out in other definitions. So we had that discussion as well. Part of the other part of this discussion was, person, policy, or system. And I brought up the practice as well. Practices are different than policy. And very often practice becomes quote unquote known as policy, although it is not. And if we fall behind our policies and how they're written, it can be very different than how we practice within whatever the system is, right? I mean, here specifically, it's in our early childhood care, right? But it can be, our practice can be very different than what how our policies are written. And so I brought up, how, means the person, policy, practice, and system, where actions and beliefs actively counteract political, social, what was a thought that I had just working in other systems, practice becomes so much more dominant than policies without folks even knowing that's what happens. And so that was, it was me, but I brought it up in our group. I can be overbearing, I apologize. But that was definitely something that I thought was important to bring in to this definition, because practice can be such an important piece of that.
Thank you, Molly. And I saw some thumbs up and head nods there. It's a observation. Alrighty. Any other comments from anyone else on anti-racist before we move on to inclusion?
I would just like to support what Molly had mentioned as, excuse me, as this being also an opportunity to provide that interruption that we're all needing to make that change, especially as we're adding, these are definitions that this isn't the only new definition, there's others as well. So it seems that this has been our the call to do that. Seems like I said, this would be a great opportunity to start moving in that direction and interrupting traditional patterns.
Thank you, Dominic.
Yeah, I was gonna say thank you, Dominic, Molly, Leslie, all of you who've spoken up and who've contributed to this. And I think the message is really loud and clear. So noted. Okay, let's look at inclusion. And group 2. And Molly, no, you're not overbearing.
Oh God, I am.
No,
sorry. Oh, I didn't realize I wasn't muted. Sorry. As Remy mentioned earlier, they said, "Oh, aha, that's what it is." We were discussing universal design and how inclusion, where universal design, I think, was initially intended for folks that experience disability. Universal design can really begin to meet the needs of any and all in regards to race, appearance, language, ability, gender identity, other identity markers, keeping all of those things in mind. And so for me, when I was thinking about inclusion and inclusive practices, really identifying and calling out universal design and how, when we meet the needs of those around us who have the most support needs, we're, unintentionally, intentionally meeting the needs of everyone else. There's a really great meme that's, of I think a custodial worker at a school shoveling the steps, and a young person in a wheelchair is like, could you shovel the ramp? And the custodial worker says, well, I need to get these steps done so all of these other students can get in. And the student in the wheelchair says, but if you shovel the ramp, every single one of us could get in, right? Not just me in the wheelchair, but all of us, right? And so that's kind of, that's very pared down, but that, idea behind universal design. And so I really feel like that, along with the intersectionalities, universal design will really bring in that inclusion definition, right? And we'll really try to meet the needs of anyone and everyone where they're at.
Thanks, Molly. Group 3.
So we felt like the word regardless is a bit negative. We're not sure how to word that, but our recommendation was, quote, all children and their families from all races, appearances, languages, quote. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm going to, yeah, exactly. Trying to get a positive term in there would be really important, just for the language itself.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And-
one suggestion that we had too about that was changing that to something like inclusive of race. Like you can just swap that for another word, and let's just not use that anymore. It seems like everywhere it pops up, it's not well liked. So we'll just strike that and move on.
Yes.
And real quick, I had actually made an edit on the document itself. I realized in quotations after it's the third line. Yeah, markers. I put that in there. I didn't know. Sorry, I wasn't trying to like be sneaky or anything. That's why I put in quotations. There's a couple other ones in quotations, and but I thought adding identity markers would be helpful and a little more descriptive.
Now, I thought we had that column locked from editing. Clearly we didn't. I'll keep an eye out for things in quotations.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate the comments and the feedback and the edits. All right, we are our time is going quickly. I think inclusive practices is our last definition. Group 1.
The same changes to the language as before. So that's basically it. Yeah.
Great. And group 2. Molly's just shaking her head.
No, I was just saying, I similar to Leslie, I think, those things kind of go in play if it's inclusive, then within our inclusive practices, that universal design, and how do we implement that within our inclusive practices? Was that universal design, in promoting inclusive practices that will then promote the inclusion of all young children. So, yeah.
Thank you. And group 3, any comments here?
Not really. We're okay with this definition for now.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So Carrie and Karina, I'm tossing it back to you for what comes next.
I think we're going to now talk about next steps, because we know that this was only a small portion of our, it's hard to open a PowerPoint and talk at the same time. Talk about next steps, because we know that today's time for reviewing was only a subsection of what we sent you. So we wanted to let you know a few things. One is that the revised rule set that you received last week was also shared with the Oregon Early Learning Council at their June 27th meeting. And so we've invited them to give us feedback this month, just like you, so that we're working off of all the comments. And so that we also have an idea of things that are flagged before we get to the September meeting. The version that you have, we would welcome you to now take any amount of time you want over the next little more than a week to continue to comment on the Google Sheet through Friday. I can't see the date with how my screen, the 15th at 5 p.m. And that then there'll be a final draft written over the summer, over August. And a public comment on the final rule set will open on September 1st. And then final rule language will be submitted to the Early Learning Council for their September 28th meeting. And that we wanted to let you know that when it was presented to the council last week, there was a request to delay adoption of one section of the rule set that you have, and it's the requirements for early care and education providers. And the rationale offered is you have to first stand up and start delivering the prevention services and know that they're being delivered before you can require the early care and education providers to request help So, there was a timing thing there that we thought, but we need everything else to be approved so that the program can be stood up. Katrina, did I get that right?
Yeah, I was going to say, it just felt like there was some logic there. But if anybody disagrees with us, feel free to speak up.
We wanted to say you can continue to give feedback on this rule set in numerous ways. If you're comfortable with the Google Sheet and now saw how it worked today, you can give us comments right on the Google Sheet. Remy has updated her feedback form, the one that has existed from our first meeting. So please feel free to, and please share the feedback form with others if you want them to get comments in by July 15th. And then if it's just easier to email Remy some specific comments or requests or thoughts, and you don't want to tie it to either of those two documents, Remy is more than happy to receive an email from you. And Katrina, you're going to share next steps for the prevention program.
Yeah, can we actually go to the office hours one and then come back? Speaking of logic, I think this feels more logical. But for anybody that wants to have, continued conversation about pieces of the rules, specific definitions, specific rules, I just wanted to kind of open up a bunch of times in my schedule next week to say, come talk. So my Thursday is pretty much blocked out, but otherwise I found an hour-and-a-half slot on each day. And there is, Carrie, I don't know if you're able to access it, or I can find it when I'm done talking and put it in the chat, but there's a link to sign up. And I put like 4 spots per each time. And if none of these times work for you, but you want to meet, just give me a call or send me an email. We'll set up a time to meet. So I don't want the conversation to stop with today's meeting. I'm really happy to continue to dialogue. Yeah. So
I did find the link.
Okay, great. And Leslie.
We had asked a little bit about there being a document developed that kind of gives us like the trajectory of all the things that need to happen to get this thing going. Like this was this set, next thing up is this, and then after that, some kind of one pager or something that could be shared out would be really helpful, because I think people are wondering.
Yes,
something like that would be helpful.
Yes, it's in the works. It's not shareable yet, but I hope to have something more of that kind of outline to share very soon. But actually, if we can go back to the last slide. Oh, Molly.
Sorry, I just wanted to piggyback on that very quickly and just say if there is opportunity for any of us to participate in those next steps, personally, I would love to continue that participation. So just piggybacking on Leslie, thank you for bringing that up, Leslie.
Yes. So more on that coming in the next 2 slides, or in this slide at least. So I already mentioned that Julia Lafferty has been hired and started. We have the research analyst person who is in the pre-hire process. And then I'm super excited to share that we have a central entity identified who will be coming on to, we're kind of in the contracting process to help with this design, development, the implementation of the program. And so what this means, it means a lot of things. It means that it's more than me and Julia right now. And it means just a lot more time, a lot more heads working on it, if you will. So the organization that we are contracting, in the process of contracting with, is Trauma Informed Oregon. with Mandy Davis, and our conversations have been with Mandy Davis and Dahlia Avelo, if you're familiar with them. And I had a meeting with Dahlia yesterday, and yes, so excited. I have lots of ideas that are just like need to kind of get onto paper and into the world, into practice, and beginning with a lot of, kind of a robust community engagement process. I think the extra energy, extra, just the team environment will really help us to like create that and get it out there and to have a chance to hear from a lot of people. And so all of you will specifically be invited to participate in that process. All of you will be invited to participate in that. And as well as, we hope to have many other conversations with a lot of different people. And then we have the RFA request for application. It is in the development phase where we've created a first draft, and we need to do some more work on it before it goes out for regions to respond to. But just to let you know that is in the process of being developed, so that we're moving towards where we can get. This will help us get to when those services can happen. So I know this is not the whole page outline that we all would like, but I hope that these are some enticing, next steps at least. Curious, do we have another slide after this?
No, we don't.
Okay. Then that was that.
Can I just jump in on the reimbursement process really fast? Yeah. Okay. Hey, so fun fact, everyone here is eligible for reimbursement. I sent out a little bit of information in the meeting packet. I'm going to send out a specific email. Right now, our reimbursement process is annoying and I wish it were different. And I hope that it'll change soon. And anyway, this is what we're stuck with right now. So I'm going to send out a little bit more of a detailed email about the reimbursement process, and you're going to have to get signed up as a vendor with the state of Oregon. It's going to be basically, you have to fill out a W-2, and then you are going to have to put in some like pretty basic information into an Excel spreadsheet that I highlight for you. So those are going to be the two biggest things, I think. But yeah, that's about it. I'll send out an email and we'll get y'all reimbursed. So thank you.
Yes, so I think today is our last meeting for now. You can give us feedback about that if you would like. We hope that the office hours for next week and the opportunity to have an extended time. We recognize that the holiday probably didn't make it easy to review everything and want to comment. So we really appreciate your time. And Karina, do you have any further words for part of our closing?
I have no words. It's been a great experience to just hear from everyone and to sit back, listen, and track it all. So honestly, just so thankful for the space and to hear from everyone. And hopefully some folks can make some extra use of, time with Katrina and or just submitting more feedback in writing. And I know that this is just the beginning. So thanks all for working with us.
Mm-hmm. I've really appreciated the conversations, the complexity, the nuance that you've offered. Remy and I have a ton of notes of what can't go into rules, but should definitely go into guidance, training, further materials for Katrina and the team that she'll be working with on this work. So we really did try to capture everything that you shared, and that it will end up in one bucket, another bucket if it didn't end up in the rules section.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciated your engagement, your thoughts, your your pushes on rules and definitions and all of that, truly. And just taking the time out of your schedule to show up over and over again for this. I truly appreciate that. It's made this a much richer process, and the whole program will be stronger as we go forward. As we develop the board game, so to speak, it will have better shape as we go. And I look forward to this being the continuation, that this is not the end, but this is the first chapter of well, it's chapter 2, maybe. The first chapter was getting the legislation passed, and now this is chapter 2 and getting these rules written. And then chapter 3 is the development of that board game, of the context. And then we'll get to chapter 4 and we'll get services actually started out there. And yeah, I'm super excited about that.
And thank you for encouraging us to have these 2 other meetings. And upon reflection, I don't know what we were thinking about 4 meetings. Remy can attest that this is one of the longer racks she has supported.
The longest with 2 extra meetings. The Early Childhood Equity Fund was the process that I was comparing this one to, which turned out to be much shorter. So really, thank you so much for being so dedicated. It really, every single conversation has been so good, and I've learned a lot in this process personally, not just about the rulemaking process, but about everything, all of your expertise. You've really all lended so much information to us and helped make ultimately a better program, because the worst thing that could happen is that we screw it all up and then we have to do all of this again. So you made it so we don't have to do that.
And we'll definitely, after today's meeting, send you today's PowerPoint and make sure you have the links to the Google Sheet, the feedback form, and Remy's email, since she's been our primary communicator, so that you can share feedback and have other people share feedback by July 15th. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Yes, thank you, everyone.